Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's so good to have you here with me today as we try to explore the crazy, wonderful, and interesting world of science, technology, and everything that goes on around us. So, today I wanted to talk about our favorite planet, and I'm not talking about Earth, it's the next favorite planet that everybody loves talking about and can't wait to go to get off of this rock, and that is the planet of Mars. Mars has infatuated our imagination for decades, and now we're slowly inching towards the reality of being on the surface and launching missions and setting our foot on the planet. And it is interesting to note that Mars is one, very close, very interesting, and very well studied. But potentially, when I saw this article, I knew I had to share it with you guys that Mars could harbor life underneath its crust. Now, if it is reading the article here, it says Martian crust could sustain life through radiation. So let's read and find out what this crazy process is that could potentially fuel life underneath the surface of what could appear to be a very dry and dead planet. And if that is possible, we can send missions there to find out. What does that mean for the solar system as a whole? Could our potential planets be teeming with life all across from Mars to Venus to everything else in the subsurfaces of these planets that can survive these radiative conditions? Who knows? Potentially. So let's read the article together and try to analyze it and understand what is going on. Deep below the ground, radioactive elements disintegrate water molecules, producing ingredients that can fuel subterranean life. This process, known as radiolysis, has sustained bacteria in isolated water-filled cracks and rock pores on Earth for millions to billions of years. Now, a study published in Astrology contends that radiolysis could have powerful microbial life in the Martian subsurface. Now, I've done a video, one of the first videos I've actually done on this channel is talking about glacial lakes that are under miles and miles of ice. One such in Antarctica that has life and where we found actual traces of life. Now, this is something similar, but under the surface of the Earth, where you can have life in isolated pockets of water. Now, we know Mars used to have running water on its surface, and then it slowly dried up over the course of a couple of billion years because it could not sustain a magnetic, what's it called? Could not sustain a core that could provide itself with magnetic shielding, such as what we have here on Earth. We have a magnetosphere that prevents solar radiation from stripping away our atmosphere and drying up, or instead, basically nuking the surface of the planet to a point that no water could sustain itself. But underneath the surface, you have an extra layer of protection. So on this planet, we definitely have reservoirs of waters and aquifers deep below the surface. Now here it says dust storms, cosmic rays, and solar winds ravage the red planet's surface, but below ground, some life might find refuge. The environment with the best chance for habitability on Mars is subsurface, says Jesse Tarnas, a planetary scientist at NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory and a new study's lead author. Examining the Martian underground could help scientists learn whether life could have survived here. And the best subsurface samples available today are Martian meteorites that have crash landed on Earth. So we're studying meteorites. Hopefully one day we'll get to study the real thing. Tarnas and his colleagues evaluated the grain sizes, mineral makeup, and radioactive element abundance in Martian meteors and estimated the Martian crust porosity using satellite rover data. They plugged these attributes into a computer model that simulated radiolysis to see how efficiently the process would have generated hydrogen gas and sulfates, chemical ingredients that can power metabolism of underground bacteria. The researchers report that if water was present, radiolysis in the Martian subsurface could sustain bacterial communities for billions of years and perhaps still today. And that's important because we know that there is actually frozen water on the surface of Mars, on its polar northern and southern caps. So we know that it exists. So it must exist underwater, which gives it a good chance that there could be microbial life deep beneath the surface. And whether or not it can evolve into more complex life remains to be seen, but it gives us a lot of good hope that this happens. And some people might be wondering, well, why is it important? Why is it important? Because what that means is that there is an abundance of elements and minerals amongst even the most desolate planets and surfaces in this world. That means that life, if it finds a way, can adapt. And that means that we can find a way to adapt to the surfaces of these planets as well. Even though we are more complex, it gives us hope that even if microbial life survive, it gives us a better chance knowing that something else is already surviving on that planet instead of it being completely dry, dead, and desolate. That life does find its way under the surface, and maybe we could also find these pockets of water to sustain life on the surface of the planet itself. Uh, Scientists have previously studied Mars radiolysis, but this marks the first estimate using Martian rocks to quantify the planet's subsurface habitability. Tarnas and his colleagues have evaluated potential richness of life in the Martian underground, found that as many as a million microbes could exist in a kilogram of rock. Geologists have found comparable densities to on Earth's subsurface. The most habitable meteorite samples analyzed appear to be made of rock called regolith breccia. These are thought to come from southern highlands of Mars, which is the most ancient terrain on Mars. Underground life, as described by this research, would require water, and it remains unknown if groundwater exists on the planet, says Haucha, and a planetary scientist who was not involved in the study. Determine whether a Martian crust contains water will be an important next step, but this investigation helps motivate the research. Where there's groundwater, there could be life. I said we don't know it for sure because we haven't probed the planet, but there's a good probability that there is because there is water on the surface of the planet, but just as easily it could have radiated, and if it did not convert to ice or got stuck onto the surface of the planet and was frozen in place, then it could have potentially radiated away from these underground subterranean reservoirs. And that remains to be seen, but it gives us a lot of hope, and it gives me a lot of hope that life does exist. Because I said I love talking about life potentially in our own solar system. Because I already made this point, but I'll kind of go over it again. Is that if life exists, even though it's microbial life, it gives us a great chance to survive on these planets, because that means that the first steps to life there is already right. Instead of trying to build life from scratch, not to mention the fact that we're larger, more complex, multicellular life, we could go to these planets that already have single cell life, okay, which means that there's water, there's resources to sustain some form of life-like interactions for things like agriculture and sustainability that could help us greatly on these planets. And that's why this is very important, because where we find life, we find the potential to increase the propensity of life on these planets using technologies that we can then create to adapt to these environments. And that's very interesting because, like I said, that it would be one of the coolest, most awesomest discoveries, and it would be a earth, like quite literally, earth-shattering discovery if we do find life on another planet, even if it's microbial, because that just confirms that life is very persistent. It exists, and even if it's in our own backyard, it gives us a chance to say, hey, like this stuff evolves or is created, okay, on these other planets through other processes, and that this process isn't completely unique to just us. That given enough time, resources, and ability on other planets, life could become intelligent. Life could become crazy and diverse. But even with a lack of resources, single cell life can still find its way through the subsurfaces of these planets. So it's very interesting, very peculiar. And I can't wait to hear more about this as the news develops. We're already sending probes. And I said, the second we have missions on Mars, the second we get any people on there, we can really drill down, and even just to the subsurface, just like even a couple of feet down and get some of these cores, we could immediately have a breadth of information previously unavailable to us through any other means. So this is very interesting, very fascinating stuff. I hope that we find this. It said it would be the most awesome thing to find, because the other thing too is if life evolves on the subsurfaces of Mars, and let's say you have meteor strikes and other things like that. Let's say like there's a concept of panspermia, which means that like what if like a meteor struck the planet of Mars and sent life here, and then it spread throughout the Earth, and maybe like all these other terrestrial bodies, right, through impacts and and traveling life between the planets. Maybe it wasn't Mars that we came from. Maybe it was like a moon on Jupiter or Saturn or somewhere else out. The amount of potential is near limitless, and the amount of thought is crazy because it's like I said, my brain is just working overtime thinking about the possibilities of how we got here. Because if we can figure out that this exists there, like what does that mean of how we developed? Like, are we all technically descendants of some other distant planet in our solar system at that point? Because if life exists there, there's got to be a first planet or a first moon or whatever that created or that generated life, right? That gave breath to the amazingness and the wonderness of all that exists. So yeah, as you can tell, I'm definitely excited. And if you made it this far, by the way, uh, I would like it if you give me some feedback. Let me know how you like these videos. Like, share, subscribe, do whatever. Always appreciate you guys that make it here to the end. And I will talk to all of you next time.